How's it going, everybody? William and Beth Troush here, wanting to share a couple dreams that we've had. One that I had, one that she had. As we were talking about I really started to think, like, you know what? Both of these dreams kind of come together on a lot of the same topic. And how cool would it be to share them together? But it's hard to get together when you have a bunch of kids, right? So that's why we're doing it so late. We had to wait until all the kids went to bed. But both dreams have something to do with marriage and current times and what many of us will likely be going through over the next couple years. At least a year and a half, maybe. So I'll get into it. The dream that I had starts off, it's at night. Dark sky. Couldn't even see the moon. Couldn't even see moonlight. Like, that's how dark the sky was. There was a couple from our church that were renewing their vows. And they were having a reception. And that's really where the dream took place. I was there at the reception, and there's tons of people. It was a really big deal, but it was a joyous and festive thing, all celebrating this couple renewing their vows. Well, the party started to kind of slow down a little bit. Our little one's here with us, so that's who you're hearing. Baby Selah. So the reception is starting to die down, and the couple leave. They leave from the reception early, kind of like a couple would from a wedding reception. Well, I'm outside, and I see them leave, and I'm outside. I'm kind of just hanging out, watching all of this take place, and I feel something up in the sky, and I go to look up, and it's this heavy object. It was so big I couldn't really focus on the whole thing. I had to just kind of look around to take it in, and somebody said that it was a planet, and I thought, oh, it is a planet, and I began to look at it, and I thought it was Venus, because that's one that you can see at times. Well, someone else said, no, that is not Venus, that is Saturn. And I'm thinking, what? How could it be Saturn that close? I mean, that's just crazy bizarre. And I'm really skeptical that it was Saturn. So I'm watching it, and it's passing over the solar system low. It was just super low, and the body kind of started to pass, and then it passed, and I'm thinking, well, surely I would see rings if it was Saturn, and I'm waiting, and then all of a sudden this giant ring starts to pass over me too, and I'm realizing this is an alignment. This is some kind of supernatural sign and a wonder. Creation is doing something here to mark this night of this couple renewing their vows. Well, then a little bit of just open, clear space passed, and then another ring passed. But the first ring was much larger than the second last ring, and I told the person, whoever it was, I was like, wow, you are totally right. That was Saturn. This is incredible. And, you know, I was just totally blown away that I had just watched Saturn pass over the very night that this couple decided to renew their wedding vows. And even in the dream, I mean, obviously, because it was such an epic experience, I knew that it was prophetic. I knew that it was a sign and a wonder. And after I woke up, I started to think about this couple, and I'm like, I think this is a word for them. So I did send the dream to them, but more than that, I really feel like it is a word for the church, and specifically our church, because it was a ton of people from our church that were in this wedding reception, but it's a word for the church. And I'm like, okay, Saturn, what does Saturn mean? Obviously this is symbolic of something. Well, I look up the word Saturn, and it literally means god of agriculture. It's a Roman name given to the planet with the rings, Saturn, but apparently that's what Saturn means, god of agriculture. Back when people worshipped planets and all the different gods. Well, I'm not 100% sure on the context, good or bad, other than it was definitely a sign and a wonder. All creation belongs to God. And I do believe that the name is the meaning. And this has to do with the whole food shortages and people returning to farming. And the couple that were in this dream, the husband specifically, I do know is very into farming. I mean, I've heard him talk about it a couple times, and so he's pretty passionate. I mean, of all the people at our church, he's probably the main person that I would think of that is really passionate about farming. So I think that it was definitely intentional for the Lord to have this couple renewing their vows, who is involved with farming, and for this planet to pass by. So I felt that it had to do with coming events and how husbands and wives, it's an opportunity to draw closer to each other. It's an opportunity to renew your vows. It's an opportunity to kind of return to that fresh first love, because likely we will be going through some things. And if we have any kind of food shortages, like some people are talking about, now, I mean, I'm the person that I want to go to Hope and Lord Mercy, like, let's just not have to deal with none of this. That would be great. But it's looking like we're probably going to have more food shortages, more issues beyond what we've already experienced. So, are we going to let this draw our relationships and our marriage into a place of strength and deeper unity? Or is it going to be something that is going to divide marriages? I really believe that this whole thing is a strategy for good or bad. I mean, are we going to embrace it? Are we going to count all things joy? Or are we going to let this bring division? And I'm sure you have heard this. I've heard it spoken many times before, that the number one thing that can bring division and end a marriage is money, finances. And when money is thin, finances are thin, people get, we had some neighbors living next door to us, and they were Christians, and you could always tell when they were going through financial problems, because you would always hear the screaming and the yelling. And I knew them well enough to know that that's what was going on. So I just encourage you to pay attention to your relationships, cultivate, cover them, invest in your marriage, return to a focus and a true deep love with your husband, with your wife, because our marriages are going to be tested. Our marriages are going to be tested with whatever kind of economic, whatever kind of agricultural storms are going to come ahead. Are these things going to draw us closer, or are they going to bring division in our home? So I know there's probably more in that dream, but those are the main things that I gleaned from it. And Beth is going to share her dream that she had, and you will understand why it totally goes along with the dream that I had. There's been times where, I mean, she dreams more than I do typically, and there has been mornings where both of us have woken up and we will have had dreams about the same topic, sometimes even with the same people in our dreams. And it's just a really cool thing when both of us are open to hearing him in the same ways. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so don't move it over too far.
I'm not.
Feeding the baby.
Multitasking.
So my dream I walked into a grocery store, and kind of like walked in between, kind of like the middle of the store. Like, you know how like you walk into a grocery store and like typically you go off into the produce section. Well, I walked like right into the middle of the store, and I was like right in the middle where all of like the dried goods are, like the center aisles. And I was standing at the end of an aisle, and I was looking down, and the shelves were very scarce, like almost completely empty. Like there were some things on the shelves, but it was like really bare. And there were other people in the store, and it was almost like there was like this this desolate kind of like it felt like hopeless. Yeah, a lot of people just felt really hopeless, and some people were kind of in there like, why am I even here? There's no groceries. They were kind of just hoping to find some food. And there were workers there. There were people who were working. And I remember I walked around the corner. I walked down all the way down the aisle and was like, wow, like there's literally hardly any food on these shelves. And I walked all the way down to the end of the aisle, and I took a right at the end of the aisle, kind of at the back of the grocery store, and was in the produce section. Like I landed in the produce section. And there was so much produce. There was fruit and vegetables and like any kind of vegetable you could think of. It looked almost like a farmer's market stand. Like there was just so much stuff. And I was like, well, perfect. Like this is fine. I'll just get a bunch of fruit and vegetables because this is kind of what we buy already. Like we buy a lot of fruit and vegetables in our own household. And there were a few other people in the produce section shopping, and they weren't freaking out. Like I wasn't freaking out, but like there was a sense of like fear in the grocery store, like because people were walking in and seeing that there was nothing there, but there was plenty of produce. And then I found a worker, and I found a worker, and I was like all of a sudden like in a break room. And there was an older gentleman and a younger guy. It was like he was like a teenager, probably like 19 or 20. And I was sitting with them in the break room, and I was just like, what is going on in the grocery store? Like, this is really weird. And he was like, well, did you hear about all of like the cargo trains and the trucks like getting in these like weird accidents where like food is being destroyed in these accidents that are happening where food is supposed to be coming in, like on these transfer trucks and trains and stuff. And I was like, oh, I have heard a little bit about that. And he was like, well, it's intentionally being done. They're being done on purpose. It's being done on purpose to create a shortage in food. And it's going to keep happening until next November. And I was like, that's interesting. Next November. He's like, yeah, next November. And I was like, okay. Like, and then that was the rest. Like, I couldn't remember the rest of the dream.
In the dream, when he told you November and you thought about that, you even in the dream were like, well, that's got to be elections.
The next election. Yeah. Like, I immediately like was like, wow, okay. Like, when you think next November, like right now, you think presidential elections, because that's when we vote. So yeah, in the dream, it was just like, oh wow, like that's not until the next presidential election. Like that's 18 months away, is what I thought. Like another year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at him and being like, for like another 18 months, like a year and a half, and he was like, yep, we're going to keep seeing these things happen. And he's like, they're not being done on accident. It's not an accident. They're being done on purpose. They're going to continue to basically sabotage our food supply. So yeah, that was
What were your thoughts just about it all being the processed food, and it all being the food in the middle? You were saying some cool stuff about that last night.
So we as a culture we as a society, I shouldn't say a culture, but we as a society have grown very accustomed to things being already made for us. So like all the center aisles in the grocery store, for the most part, is processed food. Some of it's really good for you. Some of it's not so great for you. I mean, you have like the coffee and you have the cereals and the things like that. Like, but it's dried good. It's made somewhere else besides grown in a field, and brought directly in. So then when I went around the corner, there's all the produce, which to me signifies things that we can grow ourselves. We are capable of growing our own gardens in our backyards and all that stuff. So I was telling William that we as a society have become so dependent on processed food and not making our own food, and not using our own hands, or not being capable of growing our own food, or not knowing how, but we actually do have the ability. Like, and I feel like we're entering into a season where we're going to have to go back to those old roots, like where families had their own gardens, they had their own farms, and you know, they were able to just go out and get green beans off of the green bean plant, or go out and pick apples off of their apple tree to make a pie, or whatever it was. We're going to be going back to that, because as a society, they've gotten us so used to eating processed foods that we've become dependent on them. And we've almost forgotten how to grow our own food. And, you know, we as a family have a lot of friends who do have gardens, and who do, you know, who are learning how to be more self-sustained. And I feel like that's something that, I don't want to say unfortunately, but it's something that we as a society are going to have to go back to, so that we aren't so dependent on the things that were being processed and commercialized for us, and they weren't good for us. And so that led me down this whole rabbit trail with William of, you know, they've gotten us dependent on this processed food, and the processed food has things in it that aren't good for us, and it doesn't make us healthy. And so then we're not healthy, we go to the doctor, and they then give us drugs, and we become dependent on pharmaceuticals. And so we have become a very dependent society, whether we realize it or not. And I feel like, you know, if you are able to, and you are capable of learning, then and obviously Ed Ready's capable of learning, then we need to start gardening. Like, and I feel like it's kind of like this, like, foreshadowing of, like, for the next year and a half, things are going to be really scarce, and we're going to have to be okay eating healthier, which actually is kind of a pro in the midst of all the cons that are happening.
Yeah, like some of the things like I've thought about, like I always kind of connect dots, right? Like, okay, well this reminds me of that, and that reminds me of this, and why this has happened before, you know. So just kind of looking at some of the connecting elements here, our whole like existence has been so shaken, right, from COVID and all these different things that has shaken what would be normal. And all along the way, it's been an opportunity to really be someone who is embracing an exodus from Egypt, or a deeper level of bondage in Egypt. And this food thing is just a whole nother wave of this, because people that would try to control the mechanisms of dependence and culture, they can only control so much, right? I mean, it's going to be very hard for them to control a garden in our backyard. Now, we could go on and on about all the different things, but this is a whole nother level, and it's going to be a benefit. I mean, we're really going to save money. We're going to eat healthier. We're going to be humbled. Like, humility is such a beautiful grace. I mean, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So you're going to have people, prideful people, crying and demanding entitlements, which are processed food, right? Most of it. And then on the other side, you're going to have people just humbling themselves and learning how to go back to very basic, fundamental life existence. And something that this all reminded me of was, back in the recession, when the big housing crash hit, obviously some cities got hit way more than others. And Detroit was one of those cities that just got decimated. I mean, you saw city blocks just falling apart.
Completely abandoned.
And then this whole beautiful thing started to happen where these torn down city blocks became neighborhood gardens. And Beth told me, she's like, yeah, those gardens are still going today. They're taken care of by the community and they feed the community. I mean, how incredible is that, right? So I would say just lean into God. Lean into God. I was thinking about all this stuff and I'm like, I'm looking up things for gardening, and I mean, I don't want to garden. I mean, I'm being honest, right? I'd rather do other stuff. But we just gotta embrace what God's doing and stay humble and go with the flow of the Lord. And as I'm looking at buying gardening stuff, and I'm thinking like, when am I gonna have time to do this? Like, and I started to stress out a little bit, and I heard the Lord clearly say, I mean, some of you may have seen the post I made about the painting that I did with the grocery receipts from our first year of marriage and how the Lord provided. But His grace is sufficient. And I will make this maybe one of my last statements, but in the dream that I had about Saturn, one of the grace elements of that dream was that it was passing by, right? It didn't just stay there. Saturn didn't just stay there. It passed over. And I do think that it passing and its rings all represented different seasons of this agricultural dilemma. And I don't know if any of you have heard Chris Reed's dream about the $50 bill, but this is a lot of the same spirit of that dream. So if you get a chance, go check that out. It talks about the economy and gardening and a lot of the same exact things. And the Lord's going to continue to give all of us more clarity and strategy. He is not going to abandon His kids. He's not going to, the grace and the joy is going to be on the church, the true church, the church that just doesn't just believe in their head, but actually follows Him through it all, right? And that's all I want to do in my life, is just follow Jesus through whatever. So if this is more of whatever, then so be it. And nobody said it was going to be easy. And I just pray for mercy over our nation, over the nations. And yeah, if any of you guys have any dreams along these lines, or any questions about how God speaks, or even just about God in general. I was an atheist and encountered the Holy Spirit, and now God's speaking to me through dreams and visions, and he led me to marry this woman who God speaks to her too. And all this was God's idea. So all right, blessings, love you guys, bye.